companies are recognizing that what's the business decision that I need to make, and how do I access all of the data that's available to me in order to make that strategic business decision. Therefore, they're looking at AI.
As soon as you integrate an AI element to the customer journey here, you got to worry about major data leakage and compliance issues. Today, there is no portability for an inquiry at a certain level of privileged data to then expose that data in the AI to somebody who doesn't have access or shouldn't have access to that same data in their own decision-making process.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Decision Intelligence Lab podcast. We are thrilled today to welcome two guests from a brand new organization called DecideWise. Benjamin Baer feels like a colleague to me because he's worked with so many of my friends at FICO. And Linda Crowe, in addition to being an experienced person in building online communities in the software world with IBM and at other places, is also a former student of mine and a close personal friend. I'm going to throw it over to my co-host, Michael Watson, to get us started. So welcome, Linda and Benjamin, and take it away, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Vijay. Linda and Benjamin, welcome to the podcast. Let's just start with your background and your journeys to where you are now. Like, what led each of you to get into decision intelligence?
Yeah, so I'll start. My background is in technology marketing. I've been doing it for longer than I care to admit. And have worked for companies both, very large like IBM and Oracle, as well as Sun Microsystems. I've also worked for really small organizations of, companies that are, 80 to 200 people, but always in the technology space. And my background is in marketing. I've done just about every aspect of technology marketing that you can think of, from product to partners to demand generation to, strategy, positioning, partners. Partner ecosystems, and I've led marketing organizations for startup companies. So that's a little bit about my background, and just a little parenthetical note. Benjamin and I have known each other for quite a while. We are former colleagues. So Benjamin, I'll throw it to you at this point.
Well, so our backgrounds are mirror or parallel each other perfectly. I've also spent about 30 years in marketing, mostly on the product marketing, messaging, positioning, partner strategy, ecosystem development side. But yes, as Linda pointed out, we met many years ago at Sun Microsystems when that was still a thing. And I spent a lot of my career also on the infrastructure technology company side. But about 15 years ago, I joined Fair Isaac Corporation, also known as FICO, more on the end user side, very focused on this thing we now call decision intelligence. At the time, we called it decision management or decision automation. There were so many different names for it. But I spent the last 15 years really learning, growing, getting inculcated into a FICO way of thinking about operationalizing analytics, which is really what these solutions are. How do we take data and analytics and AI and operationalize them in business process and create, consistent, expected, auditable decision process within organizations. So I spent the last 15 years at FICO building what they call the FICO platform, but it's really just a platform for decision intelligence. So Linda and I connected about a year ago, reconnected, if you will, and we started talking, and DecideWise is really the outcome of that.
Yeah.
So, Linda, and Benjamin, suppose that you're trapped on the elevator at 101 Howard. It goes up 5 floors. You've got just that long to explain DecideWise to somebody. How would you introduce DecideWise as a concept to them?
I would say DecideWise is a community of IT professionals that are interested in data, decision intelligence, and AI. That are looking for a community of like-minded people who are also in that space and want to cut through the noise of other online communities. So in other online communities, what we find is that it's difficult to find your people and it's difficult to find your conversation. So DecideWise is really about being focused on those particular folks and the vendors in that space. So we welcome vendors. We have a database of vendors. It's over 400 at this point. And we provide some information about what those vendors are for the members of our community who are looking to solve new data, AI, and decision intelligence problems, business problems.
Well, if I can just add to that, and I know we only had 5 floors in your building to give this pitch, but I always love elevator pitches because I want to go to the top of Burj Khalifa. It gives me a lot more time. It's very important, I think, to understand that decision intelligence is a new wrapper for an old set of concepts, and in the market they were always data and data management, analytics, predictive analytics, and descriptive analytics. Now AI and LLMs, rules to orchestrate a lot of that data and the way in which you make decisions, application development, simulation, digital twinning, a lot of disparate markets. And I think what's really important to understand about building a community around decision intelligence is this is a new way of thinking about a bunch of little smaller markets in a much more holistic fashion. And I think in that regard, from a buyer's perspective, it's really important to understand how all these technologies work together and symbiotically deliver on true decision knowledge and decision value in an organization. It's getting beyond thinking about BI or data or rules as standalone concepts, but rather how do I make these things all work together in a very cohesive manner? So it's about interoperability and integration. And I think in terms of building community among vendors and buyers, it's really critical to differentiate in that regard. We want to help people build better solutions for their organizations.
I think we're at the 50th floor now, Benjamin.
Okay. Well, then I still have another 50 to go for the Burj
That's
Khalifa.
right.
But
Good distinctions.
Yeah, what do you see as the current gaps between what the buyers know or want to know and what the vendors know? Like what's the gap the community will help bridge?
The gap that we bridge is bringing people together to have the conversations. Right now, in order to have a conversation around this subject, you have to find a group of people, a small group of people or another individual, and it's a very one-on-one or very one to, very few conversation. What we want to do is provide a community where these conversations are not only easier to find, but you also have a lot more people participating in them. So the knowledge base that's available to professionals in this area is much larger, and it's easier to get to them to find that knowledge. And then the other way that we're augmenting that is with the vendor database that we have, providing information about brief information about what are those solutions, what problems are these companies trying to solve, what spaces are they in, where do they compete, where are they not competing, who are their competitors, who are not their competitors, and then allowing people who have used the products and had experience with those vendors and those products to come in and offer their thoughts, not only on how the products work, how the relationship works with the vendor, but also how these technologies integrate with each other, and specific to use cases. So that's really what we're trying to do, is to surface those conversations to a larger audience and make them more accessible.
So Linda very, very briefly touched on, I think, one of the most important concepts here, and that is the use case. So decision intelligence kind of matured through financial services use cases. And most of the vendors in this space really target financial services and credit lifecycle type use cases. Even when they talk about automotive industries or telecom industries, they're largely talking about financial or credit lifecycle use cases. The fact of the matter is there's an awful lot, a breadth and depth of understanding about how to implement these technologies for those kinds of use cases. And it's only just started the conversations on what to do in retail or what to do in manufacturing or what to do in utilities or government use cases are only just starting. So one of the things that DecideWise really focused on, and I, quote John F. Kennedy a lot in this regard, and that is a rising tide lifts all boats. I believe that DecideWise has a role in increasing the total addressable market for all the vendors in this space by exposing users in other industries and across other use cases to best practice on how to make them work. And I think that if we can bring people who understand the technologies and understand the challenges in the use cases in industries together, we can really expose these technologies in a new way to solve real world problems across the globe and across these industries.
Well, you guys, I'm taking this completely sideways here out of curiosity. In given that both of you have deep backgrounds in technology and marketing, I'm interested. It'd be really helpful, I think, for our audience to hear how technology is marketed now and how much that's changed, just even in the last few years, and why a community function can play a really important role in that.
Yeah, so community so we especially in the age of, generative AI, what we're finding is that there is more and more and more content, and weeding through that content is really, really difficult. Getting to the core of exactly what is it that a company does, what a product does, takes a lot of research, even, with AI and help with AI. And even when you have that help, that AI help, that ability to be able to research much more quickly, now the challenge becomes how do you validate it? The AI is only as good as the information that's going in. And so, and that's most largely from the vendor. What we're trying to do is really surface the user experience with these technologies, with the way they integrate to each other, and with the experience that that people have with creating these customized solutions and in these different use cases that Benjamin mentioned.
Well, I also think it's important to understand where the content is coming from. And I've been struck by between Substack and Quora and LinkedIn and Discord and all of these different sites that people are going to for a wide variety of conversations that aren't focused. And frankly, you don't know who the person is giving you the answer. They have no credibility and legitimacy. You just take it for granted. So that's on one side of the coin. On the other side of the coin, in terms of the buyer's journey, you go to the vendor. And the vendor will always say, we've got the best solution for you, and we've got the solution that does all these things. And I'm not going to take away from the vendor in that regard, but I think that DecideWise plays an important role in the middle. We're not going to be everything for everyone. We're focused on the IT centric, decision intelligence centric buyer's journey and implementation journey for technologists. We're not going to take away from the vendors. We invite the vendors to participate in that. And if a company has made a decision that we're going to go all in on a particular vendor, then their community is a great place to go to get all the information you could ever want on how to make that technology work. But in decision intelligence and in the world that we live in today, there are very few solutions, if any, that do everything that needs to be done in an optimal manner to really enable this true decision intelligence journey. So we believe that an outside third party perspective that's focused, that's moderated, that really focuses on how to make all the pieces work together, or what pieces to use, has a tremendous amount of value add. We want to complement what the vendors provide, and we want to provide a much more closed and moderated community, if you will, than a Discord would be or a Substack would be.
More,
Those are
more
great places to get
Mhm.
started, but we want
Right.
them to come to DecideWise to have the in-depth, tangible conversation.
Is your value add gonna be providing research, moderating the online conversations, or is it even just gonna be networking, getting the right people talking to each other? Like, how should I think about the community in that sense?
All
It
of the
really
above.
Yeah, and I would say primarily it's about, providing that platform for members to be able to find each other, and to learn from each other, to share with each other, and ultimately, to surface job opportunities, to surface consulting opportunities, et cetera. It really is about, the community and coming together for people to come together, in this way to have these conversations.
The fact of the matter is, even today, in its most broadest context, there is no safe place for a general purpose IT conversation, an IT implementation, buyers, implementers, vendors conversation. Most of that happens today ad hoc in LinkedIn. I think that's probably the closest parallel, but they have conversations in LinkedIn about everything under the sun. And so, being able to provide a single community, an IT-centric or implementation and user-centric conversation about an enterprise infrastructure has tremendous value add. And you mentioned industry analysts. We've already had some industry analysts join DecideWise. There have been some initial inquiries about, well, if you grow this community big enough, can we survey? Can we find out about trends? Can we find out about implementation activities? Absolutely. So those will hopefully at some point in the future become part of the conversation as well.
You mentioned, you want to expand the decision intelligence community outside of maybe the financial community where it's been like, why do you think the term decision intelligence has played really well there? And what are they doing there that's unique that makes it harder for other industries to sort of adopt what they're doing?
Sure. So first of all, let me clarify. Decision intelligence is still a relatively new term for this. It used to be called expert systems back in the 90s. And then I think decision management was kind of invented mid 2000s. And we've been running with that for quite some time. And I think a newfound focus on building platforms that enable a lot of this functionality in an integrated fashion kind of took off. And Forrester called it for a long time AI decisioning systems or platforms.
Okay.
Decision intelligence is something that's spun out of Gartner's work over the last 2 years. And it's really kind of an acknowledgement that this is all about operationalizing analytics and data insights. This is about how do I take AI and integrate it into business process. And so they've started to use the term decision intelligence in a broader fashion in that regard. If you were to look back at the history, whether it was about regulatory compliance and the requirement to audit your decision making or lending practices, those lent a lot of financial services organizations, and I mentioned credit lifecycle in particular. As you lend money to people, you need to be able to document why you gave money to one person and not to another, and to make sure that those auditable trails can be reviewed and updated and defended. And so what that kind of led itself to is an understanding that we've got very complex process that require a set of automation. And so another set of use cases was insurance underwriting. How do you make sure that you're underwriting the right policies with the right set of requirements so that you're not putting your entire portfolio at risk? And so it started at the most complex, and I think they're now moving to things that are less complex, maybe a retail promotion or a loyalty program, but that you want to automate them to make them consistent. And you want to automate them because you can uh, learn data learning in real time that can impact your campaigns in real time. And so a lot of this process can become pervasive rather than ad hoc in a lot of organizations. And we're talking about internal process as well as customer facing process, that it just makes sense. And now, of course, with generative AI and AI systems, increasingly companies are like, well, how do I leverage generative AI to create a better, more consistent customer experience or a more consistent buying or supply chain experience? And there's all of these different use cases that require a set of automation, or require a set of consistent business process around them. And all of these technologies can be applied to do that.
Benjamin, as I listen to you describe that, the thing I'm really struck by is just how much noise is out there for the individual consumer, be a consumer being an IT professional, a data scientist, anybody kind of engaged in automating decision flow. Um, when you think about those 400 plus vendors that are part of the DecideWise kind of vendor community site, I is there a kinda natural organizing structure to them? Is it across verticals? Is it have you seen any patterns emerging there?
Well, so the first pattern was the one that I installed on it, and it was entirely capability focused. So we have categorizations of our vendors. There are 12 categories, I think, and I mentioned some of them. Data management, streaming analytics, descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, rules, application development, AI and LLMs. Um, Digital twinning and simulation. There were a few more platforms I think I included. And it just made sense in that regard. If I was to look at it from a vertical perspective, it would be 90% financial services and insurance and 10% other. There's optimization is a category, which is an interesting one because optimization vendors tend to play far more in the supply chain,
Right.
scheduling. It's a much broader category. Unfortunately, we live in the era, particularly on the investment side of the house, where everything is AI right now. So it's hard to say how this is going to settle out over time because everyone's thinking generative AI, agentic AI. I want to, play in that space, whatever it means and however it's going to be deployed. I think we have yet to see how it's going to fall out. And, Linda made a very interesting case when we built this community. You don't put artificial parameters on it, you let the community kind of figure it out. I think we're still early stages. I think in the coming year or so, we'll start to see things kind of settle and figure out where those categories are going to come from. But today, I don't think that we have a real sense beyond that.
Yeah, Benjamin and I were at a conference a few weeks ago before the Thanksgiving holiday, and um, we and in that at that conference, it was a series of 5-minute pitches from various different startups that were not necessarily pitching for capital; they were pitching their idea and what the reason for their business was. And I'm going to say 90% of them, even outside of the technology space, were all talking about AI and agentic AI and how AI was going to help with whatever it was their solution was. And it was interesting because these solutions ran the gamut from, you know, infrastructure technology to, I mean, there were sustainability companies that were there that were using, they're using AI as well. And I think that AI has become a popular buzzword, um, but AI really is just the next natural evolution of how people are using data and using data in a more predictive way. And as people start to recognize that, then I think that some of that AI fluff is going to fall away. And as Benjamin says, it'll settle out into different solution categories.
What throughout your career, like is someone who's maybe new to decision intelligence or new IT person who's your target audience, like what are the mistakes that you've seen people make in the past that lead astray? Like the solutions aren't auditable, the implementation goes poorly. Like what's gone wrong sort of implementing some of these systems at scale? Because these are important decisions that companies make. They can get them sued if they get them the wrong way.
Well, so I think the number one mistake is just simply that most companies aren't in a position to force that conversation at all. And at a hazard to suggest, this gray beard is a little bit older than I fear. It was just 15, 20 years ago, we were all talking about MapReduce and Hadoop. And 20 years before that, it was the dot com and everything, right?
Right.
We get so caught up in the flavor of the month or the flavor of the year that we lose sight of the business goal. We lose sight of the enterprise revenue statement. And particularly from an IT perspective, I've met with so many IT people who tell me, oh, the only thing I can think about right now, I mean, right now it's AI. I need something that's AI.
Mhm.
And, there are security issues and data leakage challenges and hallucination issues, all these smaller yet critical tactical challenges that IT people face.
Yeah.
But the consistent thing that we're trying to, react and respond to over the last 30 years is how do I integrate these technologies to become a more profitable, consistent, moral driven, mission driven organization.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you think about decision intelligence, this is about how do I take my moral imperatives and my value imperatives at the top of the organization and filter them down into business process, a replicable process throughout the organization. Regardless of what happens on a year to year technology trend by technology trend, I still need to drive a revenue, profitable, growing organization. And
Mm.
that's really what's at the heart of decision intelligence.
Yeah, I would echo that and add to it that I think in the past, where we've gone wrong with IT implementation is really in a couple of different places, maybe two or three. One is we start we start with what data do we have? And then how do I make a business decision based on that existing historical data? When really we need to be flipping the cart and saying, what business am I in? What strategic decisions do I need to make? And what data is going to inform that? What sources of data do I have access to that will help make that decision and help me get the right analytics? The other thing I think that people have done and that, IT professionals coming up want to think about, and that is the project isn't done once you deliver the integrated solution. The project is done when you've got the analytics and the business decision is made. It's operationalized, and there needs to be some ownership within IT of how does this implementation, how does this use case get operationalized within the business, because it's not just throw it over the wall. You have to have some change management involved.
I would just like to add to what Linda very rightly said, particularly around making the decision. What decision you're trying to make, what business outcome are you trying to influence first? But I would suggest that even once it's delivered and you have a model, you still need guardrails, you still need controls, and all models fall out of efficacy over time. So you're
Yeah.
going to need to continue to moderate, manage, oversee literally all of these process. Nothing is ever done.
Yeah.
So, guys, I'm curious. We've talked quite a bit about the vendors and the individuals in the community. I'm interested. Are you guys getting any sense or signals that enterprises are starting to kind of shift from, for lack of a better term, wanting to be data driven to kind of getting this decision intelligence concept?
It's been slow. I don't know precisely how to answer that question. I think in certain industries they got it and they've gotten it early on, but I think in general, um, people are still struck by the brass ring. The brass ring is the wrong example. The gold nugget, and right now, what's glimmering is AI, and I want to infuse AI in every business process.
Yeah.
So I think it's a consistent message that's been delivered by vendors in this industry for about 20 years, and the fact that Gartner has now given it a name. Gartner being the 900-pound
Yeah, the
gorilla,
king, the
has
kingmaker.
given it an yeah, they've given it a name. Decision intelligence, I think, is a really positive step. But I do know that I can speak for the number of rules vendors in the space that all of them have been preaching decisions first, methodologies,
Yeah.
business outcomes first, methodologies, for many, many years. And it's been very slow in becoming pervasive.
Yeah. Vijay, it comes back to what I just said a few moments ago, and that is companies are recognizing that it's not about looking at historical data and what data do we have. It's looking at what's the business decision that I need to make and how do I access all of the data that's available to me in order to make that strategic business decision. It always comes back to business strategy, and I think that companies are, especially with AI, which is it's predictive, obviously, and therefore, they're looking at AI as, oh, maybe this is the turning point for me to be able to not only use historical data, but also maybe some data sources that I hadn't considered outside of my organization to help with that predictive model and that predictive decision making.
But I think in addition, I've spoken to a couple of very senior level people, primarily in financial services, but they're dealing with PCI data. They're dealing with people's, financial data. There's a lot of restriction around that.
Yeah.
As soon as you integrate an AI element to the customer journey here, you got to worry about major data leakage and compliance issues. I can only imagine what HIPAA compliance means, what other security restrictions and limitations mean. Today, there is no portability for an inquiry at a certain level of privileged data
Right.
to then expose that data in the AI to somebody who doesn't have access or shouldn't have access to that same data in their own decision making process. So AI is going to cause a whole new set of headaches and challenges that, as companies look to operationalize it, as they look to create consistent business process around it, they're going to run into some roadblocks that, as of today, there's no solution for.
Right.
It's interesting that you talk about audibility and like traceability of decisions, and I've been involved in some of the academies, like the Air Force Academy, some sessions there, and one of the, obviously auditability is very important there if they're going to use any of these tools to automate any kind of decision, and so it could
Yeah.
be interesting, like bringing a community together could be interesting. Like, all right, let's bring everyone who's thought about audibility, like doing an audit, like
Yeah.
all in one room, even if from different industries. I think they can learn a lot from each other.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why having this community with, different people who are trying to solve similar types of problems, but within different use cases is gonna be so important because, the Air Force or the Navy or, some military, IT professional is not gonna, have travel in the same circle as necessarily as a financial services person, and so that's why we want this community to expose those different areas of expertise so that they can cross-pollinate and share best practices.
So what I find most interesting, and we can certainly go off on a tangent, or maybe it's another podcast to review some of this, but we explored years ago to try to explain the impact in an organization of a particular decision or assumption on their upstream and downstream counterparts. So you make a change in like your macroeconomic forecast, it'll have an impact on the treasury organization, it'll have an impact on the financial reporting organization, and it'll have an impact on your decisions about pricing. So upstream and downstream impacts on decisions within organizations. So we actually used at the time an idea used in brain surgery called a connectogram, and it's just basically a way of diagramming which neurons are connected to which other neurons in your brain, so that when you touch one part of the brain, you see it light up in another part of your brain. And the interesting thing is, coming back to AI, it's a neural network. It's designed in the same mysterious way as your brain functions. And it makes it very difficult to map why certain decisions are made and to be able to audit that and understand the logic behind it. So there's a lot of really interesting fundamental parallels between the way your own brain works and the way this AI functions in the back end that make it in some ways both mysterious and wonderful, but on the other hand, in an enterprise organization that has audit requirements or explainability requirements, makes it impossible to use.
No, I think that we as we increase the power of our technologies, we also increase the amount of potential chaos. We can get to the wrong answer so much more quickly now.
Yes, yes. No,
Yeah.
and I think, the idea of guardrails, the idea of putting in place constraints, is critically important, and I think that fundamentally shifts maybe some of the analytic modeling, talent within organizations. It doesn't eliminate their jobs, it just changes and evolves their jobs to become, real-time trackers, real-time tracers, people with a veto button or, the red button to stop the assembly line process in case of emergency.
Mhm.
I think those gatekeepers are going to be even more important over time,
Yeah. The
and people
human
to
in
go
the
back through and track and trace why things happened the way they did, and
Mhm.
understand, I think, in digital twinning and simulation environments, to understand the impact of those before they happen, so that you can put in place the right kinds of guardrails.
Ever since I've spoken with you guys for the first time about DecideWise, I'm really struck by the potential for people working in potentially very different domains to find commonality with folks who were working on similar problems in different vertical areas or different parts of the organization. Are there any kind of insights or kind of lessons learned or aha moments that you're seeing from some of the early members of the community and kind of how they're engaging with one another? Any things have surprised you?
Yeah,
Yeah, so Linda's smiling 'cause, I think we both have the same, experience. Shall I say there are some people who have, a very big opinions and are very outspoken in a lot of these technical areas, and believe they have the right way, and when you look at their way, not to say that they're wrong, they're very, very similar to the other guy's way, and finding and bridging has been a particular challenge in a lot of these different areas. There are people who think they have all the solutions for all the problems, but then when you go back and look at what they're offering, you realize how contingent or reliant they are on on the others. And part of the DecideWise strategy includes doing a lot of bridging work across a lot of these different silos to, I think, find better ways to communicate that we all have a lot to gain by working together rather than continuously viewing everybody in a competitive way
Yeah.
in very small markets. The
Well,
market is much larger than I think they view it, and we want to get people to work together.
and let me up level that a little bit, because Benjamin is talking about one specific area of community. I think there are many lessons learned so far. The first thing is that the feedback from the members and the vendors in the space has been, once they understand what it is that we're doing, that we're trying to, increase the total addressable market and really provide them with a greater provide a greater view into the resources that are available in this, community of people that can come together. The feedback has all been really positive, and it's the comment is always, "Oh yeah, now that I understand what it is that you're doing, this is really needed for our space because getting to these conversations is really difficult, and finding the right people is really difficult." Um, it's so it there's very clearly a need for this type of community in order to share that information and to share the learning. The other thing that we've heard back from vendors is that having this community and building this membership creates legitimacy and credibility for vendors, because now when they go out to secure some funding for secure capital for their business, or they're trying to explain to an IT professional what space they're in, they've got a comparative landscape that they can point to that says, this is the market that we're playing in, and this is how we approach building and integrating to these other solutions. And I'll come back to that point in just a minute. Um, but the other thing that we've heard specifically from the vendors in the space is that the more members that they can get, the better that that they can understand what solutions they need to build and what the challenges are that their actual customers are facing. And not only that, but why somebody chose a competitive solution over theirs. It's not because they didn't like the company or they didn't like the product. It's because there's some specific, legitimate business reason why they went with a competitive product, but they don't get access to that kind of information in their echo chamber, right? If they're only talking to their customers, they're never going to get that feedback about why a competitor, won that opportunity. And yes, you can do postmortems on sales engagements and all of that, but that's a point in time. And what we're trying to build is a community of people where they can always tap into that conversation and get much broader feedback than just from a single customer in a one single one loss deal. The other lesson that we've learned and that we're filling the gap on is, what does this landscape look like? We've mentioned that we've got this vendor database of 400 vendors in the space. How do they relate to each other, and where do they fit within this landscape? So we are in the process of mapping that out and helping buyers in the space understand, what does company A versus company B offer, and what's their differentiation.
That's a huge service to those that are kind of pressed to develop solutions, to figure out buy versus build decisions, to kind of find out who is coming to market to try to solve their particular problem. And I see that as a huge value of the community.
Yeah.
We just need to get to a point where we've encouraged enough people to participate in that conversation, where they see it as value add and not, broaching any kind of confidence, to create a trust in DecideWise as a forum to share and evolve and add to and complement that conversation,
Yeah.
that very discussion.
All right, maybe to wrap up, could you let the listeners figure out where can they learn more about DecideWise and what should they do next if they're interested?
Yeah. So if they're interested in joining the community and taking a look at the vendor and product database, it's really easy. You go to decidewise.net, not any other suffix, just .net, and come and join the community and start participating in the conversations. We're also on LinkedIn, so we encourage you to connect with us there.
Before we wrap up, we would be very remiss in not pointing out that we have a wonderful sponsor for our site called Decision Brain. They're a French company focused on optimization, particularly in scheduling optimization. And I say that very pointedly because Vijay introduced us to Decision Brain. They were
Yes.
already in our system, but he made the connection. And during a recent trip to Paris, I was able to meet with them face to face. So Vijay, I want to thank you for that, and point out everybody you should go check out Decision Brain too.
That's terrific. We actually had Decision Brand CEO on the podcast just a couple of months ago as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Great.
really good stuff. Guys, I really appreciate not just your time today, but you stepping into a space that's kind of near and dear to my professional heart and kind of creating a way for us to get to better answers more quickly and to find solutions that fit because these problems are hard and getting harder. And yet the tools and technologies we have are simply amazing. But getting those together, getting that stuff aligned is hard work. And really, I'm really pleased to have a place other than the vendors' press releases for people to gather information and to kind of make sense of it all. So thank you guys, and here's to a great 2026 for DecideWise, both on the community side and then on the vendor side.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you guys very much.
Yeah,
Linda,
appreciate you
Benjamin, thank
having
you.
us on and wishing you well in the future as well.
Thank you.